Yesterday, we looked at the front cover of the table of contents and the introduction paragraph of our book. We oriented ourselves to our text to determine where to go next. But now that we've kept reading, now we want to be able to talk about it, think about it, and really understand our books deeply. A way to do that is to notice fascinating parts and mull them over. One of the ways that we can do that is to think about some interesting parts that we find and talk about them. Because the best conversations are the ones that you have where you come really prepared. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about those conversations, and I'm going to give you an example from my life. Sometimes I meet in book club with other teachers from the school, and the other day we talked about what we do when we talk about text together. And we realized that sometimes our conversations aren't great. Sometimes it seems like we keep going round and round with each of us basically saying the same thing. For those of you who have been in book clubs, this might have happened to you. We decided to study our talk. We noticed was that our talk was pretty low level. We just were told what happened and repeated the interesting facts, and that might be a fine way to get started, but we didn't really go anywhere from there. We never did any of the thinking about parts that we were doing yesterday, when we thought about stuff like people spending money on fast food. We just said the facts over and over and over. We didn't come prepared with anything more interesting to talk about. So the teachers and I made a vow that we'd get better at talking about our books. I'm going to teach you what we did to get better. Today I want to teach you that the quality of your book club conversations has everything to do with what you bring to talk about. Before you can have a really rich conversation, you've got to notice something significant, something provocative, and then mull it over in your mind, doing some thinking to prepare. So if you want to have a so-so book club conversation, it's pretty easy. You just have to find facts you can share and think up a quick summary of what you read. But to have a really rich conversation, the kind that helps you think more deeply about your reading, you've got to prepare. Specifically, it helps you to notice fascinating parts and then mull those parts over, generating ideas and questions, formulating some thinking about them. You almost need to have a book club conversation in your mind to prepare for the conversation you'll have later. And a good way to prepare is to make yourself some work in your notebook. So Thinking for Book Clubs is going to be the title. And you always want to put the date. So for this one, we're also going to make a chart, but this one is going to be 3 rows, 3 columns. I'm going to collect interesting facts, interesting parts. I'm going to ask myself some questions about them. Like, what do I wonder? How does this happen? Why does this happen? And then I'm going to come up with some possible answers. That'll get me super prepared for my conversations. So I'm asking myself, what do I wonder about this? By thinking why or how. And I'm coming up with answers. Maybe, perhaps. But first, I got to find those interesting parts. So let's pretend to be a giant book club and try this with a section of Chew on This, when we learn about one of the biggest fast food chains, McDonald's, got its start. We'll read a little bit, pushing ourselves to notice the fascinating parts that will lead to a rich conversation. The text starts when the McDonald's brothers have just one burger restaurant, and it's already making them rich. They own a kind of restaurant called a drive-in, where customers parked outside and servers brought their food to their cars. Those servers were called car hops. Are we ready? By the end of the 1940s, however, the McDonald's brothers had grown tired of the drive-in business. They were tired of constantly looking for new car hops and cooks as the old ones left for jobs that paid more money. They were tired of replacing the dishes, glassware, and silverware that customers often broke or stole. And they were tired of their teenage customers. The brothers thought about selling their restaurant. Instead, they decided to try something new. Richard and Mac fired all their car hops in 1948. They closed the McDonald Brothers Burger Bar Drive-In, installed larger grills, and reopened 3 months later with a radical new system for preparing food. The system was designed to prepare food faster, lower the prices, and increase the sales. The brothers got rid of most of the items on the menu. They got rid of everything that had to be eaten with a knife, spoon, or fork. They got rid of regular plates and glasses, replacing them with paper plates and paper cups. All of the food on the new menu could be held in your hand and eaten while driving a car. The only sandwiches the new restaurant sold were hamburgers and cheeseburgers. The McDonald's brothers also changed how the work was done in the kitchen. Instead of having one skilled cook who knew how to prepare many kinds of food, they hired a few people to prepare the same thing again and again. Workers in the kitchen became like workers on a factory assembly line, repeating the same simple tasks all day. One person grilled the hamburgers, another person put them in the buns and wrapped them in paper, another person made the milkshakes, another person cooked French fries. Skilled cooks were no longer necessary. Workers only needed to know how to do one thing, not many things. People were easy to hire for these jobs, easy to fire, and unlikely to demand a big paycheck. Richard and Mac had turned their restaurant kitchen into a little factory for making cheap fast food. All the hamburgers were sold with the same toppings: ketchup, onion, mustard, and 2 pickles. No substitutions were allowed. And since there were no car hops, nobody brought the food to your car. You had to get out of the car, wait in line, and get the food yourself. The McDonald's brothers called this new arrangement the Speedy Service System. So it would be easy just to name some of the facts from this part to each other, right? We could just name all the things that McDonald's brothers did in order, but I don't think our book club conversations would go anywhere. Instead, let's look for fascinating parts that could lead to great talk, and then mull them over, having a book club conversation in our minds to prepare for the conversations we'll have later. Watch me try this first. Then you'll have a chance. So, which part should I pick? So one of the parts that really kind of jumped out at me was this part, where it says they got rid of everything that had to be eaten with a knife, a spoon, and a fork. That part jumped out at me, and I think that it could really make for a rich conversation with my book club partners. Am I ready to bring this part to our club? Definitely not. Before I bring this idea to our club, I have to mull it over. To mull a part over, it helps to ask questions about it, to try to grow some ideas. I'll start by mulling this part over, and will you be ready to finish it? Well, I hadn't even thought about the fact that McDonald's doesn't use silverware. I'm wondering why they would have decided to get rid of the silverware. So I'm going to write that down. So my interesting part was that McDonald's got rid of all their silverware. All silverware, like forks, knives, cups, spoons. Everything was turned into plastic and paper. And my question is, well, why? Why, they would decide to get rid of silverware? Why did they make that decision? Why did they decide to do that? And I want to come up with some possible answers. I want to come prepared with some deep thinking about this. So it's not enough to just get an interesting part. You also want to ask yourself some questions, like why and how. So why did they decide to do that? Maybe it's because people were breaking and stealing it, like the text kind of mentioned earlier. Or it could be because they wanted people to be able to eat on the go. Maybe it was part of their speedy service system. Not only could the food be prepared faster, but it could be eaten faster too. So now I've got some ideas. Maybe it was because it was getting stolen. Or perhaps they wanted people to eat on the go. Eat while they were, eat very quickly and leave. Eat on the go, eat quickly. So now I've got myself some really rich conversations about some fascinating parts. We asked questions and we grew ideas about that part, and it's almost like we had that book conversation in our mind. Now we're prepared for a more significant conversation. We could bring this to our book club and have a very good conversation just about this one fact. So when you try it on your own, when you get your book club started, you're going to want to pick an interesting part that doesn't really have a one-word answer. So asking the question of when did McDonald's fire all their car hops only has one answer, right? The possible answer is only one word. You want to pick a question and pick an interesting part, but also pick a question that your group can talk about. A question that, even if you didn't read the book, you can have a really awesome conversation about. So ask questions that your other group members can really think deeply about, just like you did. And you want to come prepared with these questions. So I'm just going to draw a line here so I have more interesting facts that I can gather. And as I keep reading, I can add more interesting facts. So when you're noticing interesting facts, you want to keep them in your notebook. Find the interesting part. Ask yourself some deep questions, thoughtful questions. Come up with some good answers.